Hi, I'm Emerie Jordan, and I'd like to welcome you to the very first episode of Springdale Today. Springdale Today is a free weekly podcast that airs Wednesdays at noon on your favorite podcast app, and we talk about news that is relevant to the Springdale community. For our very first episode and podcast session today, we have Student Services Coordinator Damon Donnell with us from Springdale Schools. Damon, welcome.
Very nice to be here.
I'm glad you could join us today.
Sure.
We're going to be talking a little bit about cell phone use in school, which has actually become kind of a national topic of conversation right now, and just kind of explore a little bit some of the conversations that have been happening within Springdale schools. Sound good?
Yes, that sounds great. So kind of get this all going was the governor met last June with superintendents from across the state, and at that meeting they were there to discuss the mental health crisis facing our students. From that meeting, grant funds were allocated to address the in-school cell phone use and also the just mental health needs of students. And then here we are today talking about cell phones and how we assist students with minimizing those use and engaging them in school more.
What have we seen as far as impacts for students as cell phones have become really predominant in schools over the years?
So you talked about cell phones. I'm going to use my cell phone on this question because I want to read this to you. The average American teen now spends nearly 5 hours a day on social media. Can you imagine that? 5 hours a day. I mean, that's like most of your day. And spending 3 or more hours a day on social media nearly doubles a student's risk of mental health problems. So you can see from the governor starting this conversation until now, just the need for some type of intervention there with cell phones as it relates to engagement and mental health.
Okay, very good. Now, cell phone use is currently a matter of discussion for us, too, in that we're not currently participating in the grant, but we do have measures in place within our schools to help students responsibly use their cell phones.
Sure. The Springdale Public Schools has been awarded $420,000 on the grant. Our school board still will need to make a decision if we're going to move forward on that or not, and I'll present an update to them at this month's board meeting. But yes, our amazing principals came together in middle school, junior high, and high school and developed some plans for each grade level that's consistent across each grade level. So, for example, our middle schools, they developed a procedure that students can still bring their cell phones to school, but they can only have them out before school and after school. And anything during the day, they have to be locked up in their locker. Junior highs, they went just a little step further with some additional perks for kids, which they can still have them out at the beginning and end of the school day, but then they can also have them out at lunch. And then high school is the same thing, that they can have them out at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, but they can have them out between classes and also at lunch. Something I'm really happy about that our leaders were able to do is develop these grade level procedures that really protect that academic engagement time of science, math, social studies, and English time where there are no cell phones out during those times.
What kind of feedback are you getting from families and students now that these are in place?
That's an absolutely great question. The feedback that I've received so far, and then also feedback from principals, is very positive. It's one where, hey, it's about time. That's kind of the feedback that we're getting. It's about time. And then also, now, feedback from students, I'm sure that, there's a little bit of pushback there, but parents and staff members, we've had absolutely excellent feedback from that.
That's good. That's awesome. Now, we're going to be talking a little bit, too, with Dr. Jeff Flannigan, who is the principal of George Junior High School, who had actually had some measures put in place last year to help students use their phones in a way that was constructive in school. But we really appreciate your speaking into it for us. Now, where does this leave us as a district? We were left with $420,000 that we could access, but we're not currently accessing that money, correct?
Correct. We are required to make a decision on accessing that money by this month, the September 27th. So at this month's board meeting, I'm going to present those options to the board, and then the board will make a decision how to proceed forward with that funding. I will say that currently right now with the procedures that we have in place, we have a system that's working very well. However, it is a board decision, and they may decide to go ahead and utilize those funds to purchase pouches for cell phones.
Very good. What is the date on that meeting? Is it the 9th or the 10th? And so school board meetings are indeed open to the community, and the complete list and schedule is available on the Springdale Schools website. So you can download that information, but they're typically on the second Tuesday of the month.
Yes, ma'am.
At the administration building on Johnson Avenue. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, he's like...
Think about that for a minute.
Well, I had to type it into Waze enough when I first moved here to figure out where I was going at the time. Okay, so following that board meeting on Tuesday, there'll be greater discussion of it, and then perhaps maybe the road ahead. We'll know a little bit more about what we're going to do as a district.
Sure. The board will decide at that meeting whether they'd like to proceed forward with accessing that $420,000 to purchase those cell phone pouches, or maybe there's many options that they could do, but here's two. The second option might be just to continue on with the process that we have in place with our middle schools, junior highs, and high schools.
All right, very good. Now, we've talked a lot about what we could anticipate and where we're currently at. And again, like I said, I'll talk to you a little bit more about this with Dr. Flannigan, but is there anything that you think is important to the conversation to add that I haven't considered?
Yes, I'd first like to thank parents in our community, first and foremost for choosing Springdale Public Schools, but for trusting us enough to develop procedures in place about cell phones that will engage their students more, allow students to socialize more at school instead of head-in phone, maybe face-to-face conversations. So those two things I'd really like to. But secondly, I'd really like to say, I love this quote by Helen Keller that says, alone we can do very little, but together we can do great things. And if there's, the more that parents can partner with us as it relates to cell phone usage, maybe that partners at home usage, and then that becomes this partnership where kids understand that, the cell phone is not you and I never had cell phones. And so that cell phone is not the end all be all, and that there are issues that develop from overuse of cell phone use and too much social media. So I think that our parents recognize that they're very appreciative of our procedures that we put in place, and that I believe that they will partner with us and develop some of their own procedures at home as it relates to cell phone and social media use.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Damon. We really appreciate your spending some time with us today.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. I love doing things like this.
Right. Awesome. And then I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities to talk to you about things more in the future. It seems like if there's anything happening in the district, your name seems to be attached to it. So I look forward to talking to you.
I appreciate it. I don't know about that, but I appreciate your confidence in me.
Thank you, Damon.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too.
See you.
For this session, we have Dr. Jeff Flannigan, the principal of George Junior High School, joining us. Doctor, thank you for spending some time with us today. We appreciate having you here.
Thank you for having me.
We had Damon Donnell on earlier, and he chatted with us a little bit about cell phone use in schools as far as where the district stands on it and sort of the conversations that we're having right now. But as I understand it, George Junior High School has actually had a system in place to help students responsibly use their phones in schools even before this. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my first year at George was the 21-22 school year. And, one of the things being new, you want to kind of get a feel of what you're dealing with before you start implementing these radical changes or whatever, because you don't want to change something that's working. And I was not coming into a quote-unquote failed school. Like, I wasn't brought in to resurrect or do anything like that. That wasn't it. Ladina Eads had done a great job at George, and she was elevated into director of special education, and so that's where the opening came. So I wasn't coming in with this mindset, I'm going to change all of these things, right? But in my previous stops, cell phones had been a distracting issue, and something I'd worked to try to eradicate for the purpose of increasing engagement and allowing teachers to better teach and students to better learn. But the culminating incident, I was really going to wait until the 22-23 school year. But October of 2021, I'll never forget it, I was just doing walkthroughs, popping in different classes, and I went in the social studies hall, went into a room of a teacher, coach that's no longer with us. He's not dead, he's just not at George anymore. I always preface that when I say no longer with us. But I walked in the room, and the desks were arranged like tables. So they faced each other to create like tables, right? And there was a young man who had his Chromebook open, teacher's teaching, but he had his cell phone in the middle of the screen on his Chromebook, it was resting against that. So from the teacher's vantage point, kid is engaged, Chromebook's up like everybody else is up, but the kid had the cell phone. His friends saw me, and I looked at them like, don't say a word. I was in the room 3 minutes before the kid even realized that I was sitting right next to him as he was texting the whole time. And I literally left that classroom, and I called Shannon Tischer, who was my direct boss, assistant superintendent, associate superintendent now for secondary. And I said, hey, can I implement what I want to do with cell phones in January? And she said, absolutely, whatever you want. So at that point, I created a letter and sent it out to all of the parents, emailed all of the students. And then I set up what we call an advisory tour. So all of our students have advisory every day. For those that don't know what that is, it's kind of like homeroom. It's their hub. It's their place where, the advisory teacher has a full understanding of what the kid needs and things of that nature. And so we use advisory to do all of the things, the student success portfolios and things of that nature. I did an advisory tour, and I met with every single student in the building for an hour each. Each advisory class, we call it an advisory tour. It took 3 weeks. And they got to ask any questions that they wanted about the policy, and I answered them. And the only rule was, as long as you were asking respectful questions, then cool. You got to teach kids how to advocate for themselves. And the thing that came out of that is none of them wanted it, obviously. They did not want it, but every single one of them understood why we had to do it. And so we actually implemented it in November with our Learning Center students. And those are our students new to the United States. So we started with them first because they didn't need any distraction. And so that was a test case. And then I believe January 4th of 2022, we implemented our policy.
And what have you seen as far as changes within the culture of the school as a result of those changes?
Beautiful thing. We had some legislators that came to visit spring of 23, and they were commenting about how students were talking to one another because they did not have the distractions of cell phones through the hallways, and they didn't know we had a cell phone policy. And then when I explained it to them, and so that's one thing. You see more engagement. You see less distraction, obviously, in the class. Like teachers have reclaimed the ability to engage with students. Cell phones are huge distractors to people, not just children. If you don't believe that, come to one of my in-service meetings, or come to a district in-service meeting with our principals meetings. We're always constantly, and a lot of it is checking because we're out of our buildings, but it's a distracting agent, and teachers now have the ability to engage with students. Students now have to have real conversations with those around them as well as their teachers. So it's opened up that engagement and communication tremendously.
Now then, opening up that engagement, has that impacted and flowed over into student learning as well? Have you seen improvements that you tied back to the fact simply that they're more engaged in class?
Yeah. So I yes, obviously, we don't have to be, historians or researchers to know if you create more engagement with students in class, then learning is going to increase as well. How much of that is directly tied to the cell phone policy, I don't know, but I guarantee you it's not hurt. We have seen educational improvements. Obviously, post-COVID, we've seen growth in that area. We're state measured above average relative to growth, and that is something we're very proud of, but we're continuing to push. And again, when you're dealing with a population of students that are large English language learners, You do not want any barriers. Large English language learners, low socioeconomics, those are all factors that historically have been a drain on academic achievement. So anything that could potentially be a barrier that you can control, I think it's your responsibility as an educator to remove those things, right? Because I can't change. We call it LOC, locus of control. We don't discuss things that we can't control. So we're not having conversations about socioeconomics because we can't change those things. We're not talking about English language learners from a standpoint of, oh, these poor kids. We don't do that. That's the soft bigotry of low expectations. That's not accepted. So we deal with the things that we can't control. We can control whether or not you can have a cell phone in your class. We can control what the school environment is. We can control, our whole thing and what we believe in at George Junior High School is respectful, responsible, safe, and kind. That's our thing, right? So we can control all those factors. And so it really just came down to, this is a problem, let's fix it.
Now, I know a lot of conversations with parents. No parent wants their child's learning to be hindered. And I think some of the concerns parents might have is accessibility to reach their child in the event of emergency or crisis. Now, how have you seen that play out at your school? I have to assume since the implementations happened that there has been a case where a parent has had to reach a child in the midst of a crisis or concern, whether it's family or school. How have you seen that played out? Has not having cell phones been a factor in preventing parents from reaching their children?
So here's what I say. You're a parent, as am I. What emergency is a 13, 14, or 15-year-old the point person for? Like, that's not a thing. Every single classroom in George Junior High School has a telephone. Every one of them. If you call me as Emerie Jordan, a parent, I can put my hands on any of your children that you would have in my school within 2 minutes tops, right? There is not a single emergency that's going on where the only person that can fix this emergency in the moment is a 14-year-old child. That's just not true, right? So our parents know how to contact us. We have school status. So our parents have direct access to every single one of their children's teachers right on their cell phone, period. Like, they can call their actual teacher directly. So there's, like, you see what I'm saying? It's really not a real thing. And you know how many parents I've had since January of 2022 that have complained about that?
How many?
2.
There you go. I mean, that's a case in point then. I mean, but I can appreciate why that would be a concern for parents. That being said, I'm grateful that George, as well as every other school in the district, has a system in place to make children accessible to their parents in the event of an emergency. So fantastic. Now, there's a lot to talk about. Damon talked to us a lot about the Arkansas Department of Education and their plan, conversations happening within the district and what things may look like for us in the future. Is there anything that you would add to the conversation that you think would be important to mention to families just simply based on your experience?
So I think what we try to do at George, and that's all I can speak to, is how we operate, is make our parents and our families partners in education, and let them know we're playing on the same team. We have the exact same purpose. Now, as educators, there are going to be ways that we go about trying to reach that goal that may be different than what a parent would do. And so I tell parents all the time, you have 1, maybe 2 kids in our school. They're the most important, children in the world to you. I got over 700 of those, right? And no 1 or 2 can be more important than the other 700 plus, right? So when we make decisions, we have to think of the good of the whole versus that 1 or 2 individual that you get to focus on. So the thing that I will say that we talk to parents about is, if the child believes that they can get the parent against the school, whether it's administration, the teacher, or whatever, now you're about to fail the child, because they'll then play both against the middle, So if they know that we're aligned as one and our lines of communication are open, it makes it much less of an issue for a child to get on board. And so what we found, because of how openly we communicate with our families and our monthly parent participation meetings, and I'll give you a perfect example. I was just having a conversation with my bookkeeper. We implemented a new dress code rule relative to young men and sagging pants. And so I sent that information out to all of our parents via school status. And I got so many messages back from parents in Marshallese, in Spanish, and in English, thanking us for doing this and in 100% support of what we're trying to do. More importantly, because of the why, that we're not just implementing rules for the sake of being, making rules. To be honest with you, the less rules, quote unquote, that you have, the more order that you're going to have. And so if you make your rules very basic and straightforward, then the kids assimilate fairly easy. Discipline is a love language. And kids may not know how to articulate it like that, but they know when they're wrong. And if you're willing to allow them to do things that they know they should not do, and you don't say anything, then they know you really don't care about them. Now, they may act like that's what they want, but you now let them know you're not truly concerned about who they are and who they're trying to be. So the pushback is a lot less than what a lot of people would think. And that's what I do know prevents some people from making certain steps. But I always ask them, what would you be not willing to do for your child to be successful? So that's just kind of how we do that.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That was super insightful, and I really appreciate your providing that perspective to us based on the experience. Thank you so much for being with us today. You're doing a lot of innovative things at the school, and I know this will not be the last time we'll be chatting with you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Hi, I'm Mary Jordan. I'd like to welcome you to this week's episode of Springdale Today. Today we have 6th grader Gabby George of Helen Tyson Middle School, as well as 5th grader Emerie Johnson and EAST facilitator Jennifer Boogart of John Tyson Elementary School joining us today. Ladies, thank you all for being here with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for inviting us.
Now, Gabby and Emerie, they've been hosts of Tiger Talk, a podcast at John Tyson Elementary School for 2 years, and they're going to help me be more successful by giving me some tips today on how I might run my podcast or host my podcast. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys have to share. Now, your podcast is part of the EAST initiative, which is a statewide program. Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. EAST initiative is really more than statewide. There are programs outside of Arkansas, but Springdale has the largest contingent of EAST schools and EAST programs in the state. EAST is a community service and technology class that students have the opportunity to participate in, and this podcast grew as a result of encouraging students to learn those technology skills and develop their presentation literacy skills.
Now, and community service is an aspect of that, right? So
Definitely.
As I understand it, part of the EAST initiative is students such as yourselves identifying problems or needs in the community and then using technology to meet them. Is that right?
Yes.
That's right. Tiger Talk started during COVID when parents were not able to enter the schools. And so the EAST students at John Tyson Elementary decided, hey, we can invite the parents into our school to learn about all the incredible things that are happening at John Tyson Elementary through this podcast. And so that's how Tiger Talk originally began, as a way to serve the parents and let them know what was happening in our school when they were unable to come in and see for themselves.
That's really cool. Okay, so now it's evolved a little bit, right? COVID's not, blessedly, we're back in school. So what do you guys talk about now on the podcast?
Last year, we talked about the learner qualities, like determination and wonder. And the learner qualities are something we use at our school to help the kids at school use determination to keep on going on work that they have.
Kind of like how you guys have hosted the podcast for 2 years, right? Very cool. Okay, so what have you guys really enjoyed about hosting Tiger Talk?
I've enjoyed being able to hear about people's experience at JTE and being able to hear about how some of our learner qualities have actually helped people.
And what about you?
My favorite thing that's been on the podcast was being able to meet new people and learn from them.
So what do you think you guys have learned as a part of hosting a podcast?
I think I've learned how to be more confident when I talk. Instead of just nodding my head yes or no, I can actually speak up and say something.
Very good. Emerie?
The same for me, because I used to stutter when I was talking to people and not look at them. So now I can look at adults and other people and speak confidently.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, so what about people you've talked to? What's a favorite story you guys have been able to tell on the podcast so far?
My favorite story was when we met Mrs. Crane. She was on our Wonder podcast. She had a bird's skull with her, and we asked questions about it, and she actually found it on a beach, and so that was really cool.
And she's the science specialist for Springdale Public Schools.
Ah, that's a really cool one. What about you, Gabby?
I've had lots of podcasts that I really enjoyed, but one that I enjoyed the most is, I think, the Termination podcast, when lots of people came to our school, and this lady, I forgot her name, but she was telling us about how when she was a kid, she's Hispanic, and she was reading a book, and she closed a car door on someone's fingers, and then they just started saying racist stuff to her. And I liked hearing about that because it's something that's actually happening in the world that's unfair.
I told you that Tiger Talk started as a way to invite parents into Tyson Elementary, and the first year, all of the visitors and the guests were in-house. And then the following year, the students did a podcast about the Guide for Life, 5 skills for personal success, and their reach extended to the state. So they invited people throughout the state to talk about the Guide for Life, decision-making, understanding. And my favorite story so far, so this is the 5th season of Tiger Talk, and my favorite story is A Year of Golden Stories. And the students produced 50 podcasts that year, and it had an international reach. They were able to Zoom with a guest who was overseas, and all throughout Arkansas, they had guests who came in because Tyson Elementary has been very special to many people for many years. And I loved hearing how the people have left Tyson Elementary but always carried it in their hearts.
That's really cool. You guys must have met some really neat people as a part of those conversations. So in talking about a podcast and deciding about what it's going to include, what do you guys think? What are some of the most important things that a podcast should include?
I think a podcast should include things that might help other people. We did the Spread Positivity segment, and it was just people sharing ways that they think people should spread positivity. And so I think that people should talk about ways to actually help other people.
It's a really good idea. What do you think, Emerie?
I think it should include questions to help people tell their story or what they want to say.
That's really good advice. Well, that's all really good advice. Now, what about the challenges I'm going to face? What are some of the things that you guys have dealt with that have been kind of difficult to deal with as a part of hosting a podcast?
Well, sometimes we're like missing a host, like they were sick or out of school, and so we didn't have them, but our script was already planned out, so we would have to think about who is going to say what.
So there's a lot of flexibility required, it sounds like. Emerie, what about you? What kind of challenges have you felt as a host?
Some challenges I faced was sometimes like the people that came, their names were hard to say, so like I would mess up on saying them.
Yeah. I have some guests on later in the week, and I've asked them to kind of write their name to make sure that I get it right, because people's names are very important to them, aren't they? So what kind of things might I feature on the podcast within the district that might be some kind of fun things to talk about, you think?
I think some fun things about the school district that you could talk about is like how kids are able to learn in different ways. So you could get like teachers that help like kids that have a hard time learning and talk to them about like how they have to teach them when they're like that.
That's really good advice. That's really good thoughts. So what do you think, Emerie?
I was kind of going to say the same thing as Gabby was like fighting teachers to help like talk about what they do with students to help them learn.
Thank you guys. Now, where do you guys think you're going to go from here with EAST? Are you going to continue to take EAST? I know, Gabby, you've moved on to Helen Tyson Middle School. Do you think you're both going to continue with the EAST program as you move forward in Springdale schools?
Yes, I think I want to do EAST for as long as I can.
Why is that?
Because EAST really just helps me with like skills that I can't do in a regular classroom, like talking to people that I don't know and just getting to work with different types of technology.
Very cool. What do you think, Emerie?
I think I will also do EAST as long as I can because it's a really fun class that you can talk to people and learn to use technology that you couldn't in a classroom.
Very cool. Now, Gabby, I understand that you've actually moved on to do some exciting things with the state EAST initiative as far as podcasts. What can you tell me about that?
Something about the EAST Initiative podcast is it will be harder to record, I feel like, because we would get people from like around Springdale, but we would also get people, we could call them and stuff, but with the two hosts in different places, it might be harder to record podcasts, but I feel like it's going to make it a bit more special, being able to like tell people about like how they had to like drive somewhere just to record a podcast episode.
Right. And what Gabby's referring to is that she is hosting the Arkansas State EAST Initiative podcast with a host who is a high school student. And she's going to be producing this statewide. And a big part of that was experience that she gained hosting Tiger Talk. Is that right?
Yes.
What made you want to do that? What made you want to do it on such a larger scale?
Well, I love Tiger Talk because I get to talk to so many people, and I really enjoy podcasting. I remember when I tried out for Tiger Talk, I told Miss Boogart that I really like talking, and now that I have to go to a different school, I want to keep podcasting. So whenever I tried out, I was really hoping I could, because then I would be able to definitely do another podcast.
That's really cool.
So, Gabby, why do you like to talk?
Because my name is Gabby, and Gab means talk.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So it was predestined is what it was. All right. So where can we listen to Tiger Talk? And what is the name of your podcast, Gabby, the State East Initiative one? Do you know?
I don't think we've picked one out yet. I think we're like tied between a couple. I'm not sure what they are, but they were really cool names. And like when you hear them, you're like, oh, that sounds cool. And you'd probably want to listen to that podcast.
All right. So then I would probably keep an eye on the Helen Tyson Middle School Facebook page, because I imagine it may get shared there, but also kind of watch the East Facebook and East statewide website, and likely we'll be able to see that when it starts to come about. Now, what about Tiger Talk? Where might we be able to listen to Tiger Talk?
You can listen to Tiger Talk anywhere you get your podcast, such as Spotify. You can listen to Tiger Talk.
And when does Tiger Talk come out?
This year we haven't started podcasts yet, but we still have the podcasts from last year and the years before on Tiger Talk. So it's like all at the same place. So you can listen to all the podcasts on the same thing.
They're all linked on East at John Tyson Elementary School's Facebook page also. So if someone is interested in doing a deep dive, there are about 85 episodes that they could listen to.
Awesome. Okay. You guys have shared so much great information with me today. Is there anything that you guys would like to add to the conversation or say that I haven't thought to mention?
I would love to thank Dr. Shelley Pogue, the principal of John Tyson Elementary School. She's a champion for student agency, and it was her idea to have a student-led podcast. And as a result of that, I have been able to join in the joy and adventure of podcasting with these students. And I just appreciate the opportunity that her vision allowed for the students and for me. It's been a great pleasure. And so I would like to thank her.
Thank you for sharing that. Anything else you guys think that popped into your head that you thought, gosh, I need to be sure to mention this or say this?
I think that if you're going to invite guests, you should invite like ones that have something to say and like something good to say. So you have an interesting podcast that people want to listen to.
That's really good advice. Thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to say that you made note of that you wanted to share?
You know, at the end of every episode of Tiger Talk, they roar because John Tyson Elementary School mascot is
a tiger.
The tiger. And so they ask their guests to roar too. So do you think she should have something catchy that she says or does during each of her podcasts?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. Well, why don't we start with closing out with your roar, and we'll start there, and we'll figure out where we can go from there. How's that sound?
That sounds good.
Okay, will you guys lead me through that, and we will close our podcast with a John Tyson roar?
Okay, so you're just going to do your best roar on the count of 3. 3, 2, 1.
Roar!
That was awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us today with Springdale Today, and we will see you next week, Wednesday at noon.
Springdale Today is a production of the Springdale Public Schools Communications Office.
The podcast is hosted by Emerie Jordan and is produced and edited by Micah DeLacy.
Be sure to subscribe to Springdale Today for free on your favorite podcast platform.
And don't forget to follow Springdale Today on social media for episode updates
And behind-the-scenes conversations.
Thank you for listening. We hope you join us in the future as we continue to learn about the amazing stories happening in Springdale today.